Electronics often go wrong in crop circles. Some people will describe a strange tingling, headaches, or feeling rather ill.
What happens when the most advanced artificial intelligence on Earth stares into a mystery we still laugh off as a hoax? Not only did it fail to explain it, it broke down trying. Scientists fed over 10,000 images into a neural network trained to detect and categorize every type of man-made design. But when they slipped in a pattern pulled straight from a farmer's field, something unexpected happened. The system flagged it, froze, then labeled it as an anomaly beyond human logic. This wasn't random, it wasn't art, and it definitely wasn't from Earth. The formation that AI couldn't read. It began as an ordinary research project, or at least that's what the team at the European Neural Pattern Recognition Lab thought. The goal was straightforward: train a generative AI system to categorize global symbols, architectural motifs, mathematical fractals, and ancient artistic patterns. The team had fed it everything from Mayan glyphs to Tibetan mandalas, blueprints of Gothic cathedrals to NASA orbital telemetry. The AI performed beautifully, until they added crop circles. Not just any crop circles. The dataset was curated to include those formations previously labeled as high complexity, low explanation anomalies. These were the ones that had puzzled experts in geometry, physics, and even military intelligence. Still, no one expected much. Most scientists involved considered crop circles a quirky side topic, something to indulge during lunch breaks or late-night brainstorming sessions. But the moment the images entered the neural net, something changed. The system didn't just struggle, it stalled. It flagged several patterns with what it called algorithmic entropy spikes, a kind of digital distress signal indicating that the data was structured, yet not categorizable. These formations had symmetry, order, repetition, even mathematical layering, but they didn't match any known dataset. The AI couldn't label them as human art. It couldn't file them under natural geometry. It didn't even try to guess. It simply returned a status no one on the team had seen before: not classifiable. The AI had been designed to function like a filter. You put something in, and it tells you what it is, or at least what it's most similar to. But in this case, there were no suggestions, no second-best guesses. The system simply lit up with warning colors. Something about the symmetry and nested complexity in one specific crop circle formation caused it to generate what looked like a map of interference patterns. Normally, this happened when the system tried to interpret encrypted data or unreadable formats. But this wasn't code. It was a shape pressed into a field. Dr. Elena Kravtsov, the lead data analyst, was the first to realize the gravity of the situation. She ran a secondary compression test on the image, expecting the file size to drop significantly as the system reduced the pattern into simpler data. Instead, it did the opposite. The file expanded. The system was detecting a level of embedded complexity that surpassed that of ancient ciphers and even some types of DNA sequence encoding. That's when the word message started getting tossed around, not metaphorically, but literally. Researchers were now staring at a formation that resisted compression, mimicked intelligent design, and triggered the same AI flags used to detect forged currency, deepfake data, or malicious encryption. This wasn't about pretty swirls in wheat anymore. Something or someone had left a fingerprint in a field that artificial intelligence now recognized as intentional. And not just intentional, purposeful. But the mystery didn't stop at the pixels. When scientists visited the original site of the formation that stumped the eye, they found something even more baffling. The wheat wasn't just flattened. The stalks were bent at precise 90-degree angles, still alive, unbroken, and woven over one another in a pattern more complex than anything a team of humans could replicate in a single night. There were no vehicle tracks, no broken stems from careless footfalls, no equipment drag marks. It was as if the design had been pressed into existence by a force that moved without touching. That's when they noticed the soil. Beneath the pattern, samples showed subtle crystallization of minerals, microscopic traces of metallic spheres, and mild magnetic alignment changes. These were not the byproducts of pranksters with boards and string. These were the kinds of shifts you might expect after exposure to high-frequency electromagnetic radiation. But no sources of such energy were found in the area. No power lines, no cell towers, and no radiation spikes in the surrounding environment. Only the formation bore the evidence, perfectly centered and sharply defined. Faced with mounting physical and digital data that pointed in one direction, intelligence without origin, the team decided to press further. If one formation could trip an AI's alarm systems, what would happen if they ran the entire archive of crop circle formations through the network? And that's where the real chaos began. Could the rest of these so-called field patterns hide something even deeper? An encrypted language that's been sitting in plain sight all along? Patterns beyond recognition. Once the researchers began feeding in the full library of crop formations, the results only became stranger. Over 200 high-resolution aerial photographs, collected across multiple decades and continents, were loaded into the system. The AI began processing them, each pattern analyzed for geometry, compression characteristics, symmetry, balance, and entropy scoring. It worked in silence at first, sifting through what it assumed were basic organic shapes. Then the alerts started flashing again. The neural network was built to detect intentionality in design. When it flagged known mathematical forms like Fibonacci spirals or Penrose tilings, it marked them as highly ordered and human-made. But when it hit the most intricate crop formations, something unusual happened. These designs did not register as human, nor did they register as random. They existed in a third category, an unknown classification that fell into the narrowest band of algorithmic order ever measured by the system. They were not just complex. They were efficient, elegant, and precise to a degree that made most ancient architecture look like finger painting. Researchers had expected the AI to either dismiss the formations as artistic flourishes or maybe even label them as errors. Instead, it began to highlight specific patterns and elements that appeared again and again across multiple years and locations. These recurring elements were not identical, but they were similar in a way that suggested a unifying blueprint. The same arc ratios, the same mirrored segments, the same radial layouts balanced with almost supernatural accuracy. This was not the kind of variation found in human pranks or even in natural chaos. The eye was recognizing what it called recurring structural fingerprints, elements that appeared with such frequency and consistency that they could not be explained by coincidence. In one case, the system flagged a pattern that appeared 12 years apart in two different countries, each with the same internal geometry, but rotated exactly 180 degrees. That level of recurrence raised a difficult question. If no known group was responsible, and if the geometry surpassed human capability within the constraints of time and location, then where did these patterns come from? The AI had no answer, but it began offering something close. It proposed that the formations were part of a larger information set, not individual messages, not random designs, but nodes in a distributed signal system, each one reinforcing the structure of the next. The idea was unnerving. What if these crop formations were not isolated events, but pieces of a much larger communication protocol? Like fragments of a puzzle, their full meaning might only emerge when the entire set was seen together. That theory changed the way the team viewed the project. No longer were they just cataloging shapes in wheat. They were mapping a language made of geometry and form, one that had been seeded into our world over time. To test this idea, they arranged the flagged patterns side by side in chronological order. What they saw astonished them. The designs seemed to evolve. Early patterns were simple, concentric circles, basic lines, mirrored pairs. Later ones showed increasing complexity, integrating mathematical constants, fractals, and astronomical alignments. It was as if the formations had matured, their language growing more intricate as human technology improved. The system highlighted this evolutionary arc, suggesting that the creators of these designs were adapting their message in step with our progress. This raised a new and more unsettling possibility. Were these formations waiting for us to catch up? Were they calibrated not just to our fields, but to our minds, slowly escalating in complexity as if to test our growing capacity for recognition? The AI's latest discovery supported that theory. It isolated a specific cluster of formations from the past 5 years and compared them to brain scan responses from a visual cognition study. The overlap was shocking. The patterns that had confounded the AI the most were also the ones that triggered the deepest neural responses in human test subjects. That finding sparked a hypothesis even more bizarre than anything the researchers had considered. What if these patterns were not just meant to be seen? What if they were designed to be felt, to bypass logic, engage emotion, and activate deeper structures of thought than language can reach? The AI suggested the concept of neuro-symbolic messaging, information encoded not just in visible design, but in its effect on human consciousness. It was a hypothesis no one wanted to believe, but the data didn't lie. The patterns that stumped the machine were also the ones that woke something up in the human brain. Now, the team had to ask a question they had avoided from the beginning. If these designs are a language, then who exactly is speaking to us? And if the language is real, then what happens when we finally learn to read it? The message in the math. Once the researchers accepted the idea that these crop formations could be more than just visual puzzles, they began to examine the underlying structure in a new way. They weren't simply looking for symmetry anymore. They were treating the patterns like syntax. Each curve and spiral, each radial element and nested polygon could be a symbol, just like letters in an alphabet or characters in a code. With this shift in approach, the AI's analysis took on a startling new tone. It wasn't just cataloging shapes, it was interpreting them. The neural network began clustering formations based on shared characteristics. Certain patterns repeated, not just visually but mathematically. Some formations encoded prime numbers, others reflected ratios tied to astronomical constants. Several designs matched perfect renditions of the golden ratio, not just once, but embedded in multiple overlapping layers. What startled the team most was the number of formations that contained fractal geometry, recursive patterns where the structure repeated itself at different scales, something nature does effortlessly, but humans struggle to recreate with this level of precision. One formation from Wiltshire, England, stood out. It mirrored the Mandelbrot set, a mathematical object so complex and detailed it took decades to fully understand, even with modern computers. When the eye overlaid this crop formation with the Mandelbrot visualization, the correspondence was nearly perfect, and yet the formation had appeared overnight. No team of people could have mapped it, plotted it, and pressed it into the earth with that level of precision without leaving a single trace. No tire marks, no footprints, no signs of tampering. This led to a dramatic realization. These weren't messages meant to be read linearly. They were informational fields, dense, symbolic data compressed into visual arrangements that required both intuition and mathematics to unlock. The kind of data an advanced intelligence might send to test another's ability to decode abstract information. Not words, not pictures, but conceptual frameworks are disguised as patterns. That's when the researchers decided to bring in a cognitive AI system, one that didn't just process visuals but interpreted intent. This model had been used previously to analyze ancient manuscripts, predicting likely meanings based on visual structure, cultural context, and symbol recurrence. When they exposed it to the most complex crop formations, the system struggled. It couldn't offer translations, but it did offer something else. It began generating hypotheses. The AI proposed that these formations might be ontological signals, representations of how an intelligence perceives reality, not just messages, but frameworks. It showed how the geometry mirrored physical forces, energy flows, and harmonic ratios that appeared in nature, but also in particle physics. One formation even aligned with the vibration patterns of cymatics, the study of visible sound vibrations in materials like sand or water. In other words, the pattern looked like a frozen sound wave, but no known human agency had claimed it, and the effort required to recreate it in a field would have been immense. It was at this point that the interdisciplinary nature of the mystery began to bloom. Linguists started weighing in. Philosophers, quantum theorists. Everyone wanted to get involved because the evidence no longer supported a purely scientific or artistic interpretation. This was information that danced on the edge of all human fields. The crop formations were beginning to resemble ancient mandalas, not just in appearance but in psychological effect. People who viewed them reported strange feelings, a sense of peace, curiosity, even mild euphoria. This wasn't mass hysteria or anecdotal coincidence. Brain scans confirmed the activation of specific regions of the mind associated with spiritual awe and symbolic understanding. Now the question wasn't just who or what was making these. The question was, why do they make us feel something? More experiments followed. Subjects viewed images of known hoaxes and authentic anomalies, while researchers monitored brainwaves. Time after time, the true anomalies lit up deep pattern recognition regions in the brain, not just visually but emotionally. The AI predicted this effect based solely on geometric data. Before a human even looked at an image, the machine could tell whether it would stir something within them. This opened an entirely new hypothesis. What if the formations weren't trying to send us messages? What if they were trying to awaken a part of us that already understands? It was a terrifying yet thrilling idea, that perhaps we are not meant to decode the patterns with logic alone. Maybe they are meant to bypass logic altogether, to talk to a part of the brain that remembers things it was never taught, a kind of ancestral recognition or genetic memory triggered not by language but by perfect form. Then came the most mysterious discovery of all. In a series of high-altitude satellite images taken across multiple years, the AI noticed something strange. Some formations appeared aligned not just with each other, but with distant celestial coordinates. These weren't arbitrary positions. They matched the alignment of specific constellations, sometimes correlating with pulsar clusters or quasar emissions. A few formations even reflected positions of astronomical phenomena that had not been officially discovered at the time they were created. The AI flagged this as statistically improbable, a 1 in millions chance that the alignment could be coincidence, which left only one possibility. The designs were not just referencing Earth, they were referencing space. This meant one thing: the message wasn't meant for just us. So if these patterns connect to the stars, the cosmos, and even our own subconscious, what does that say about the source, and what might it be trying to prepare us for? Signal or summons? By the time the full analysis was complete, the AI had done more than categorize and compare. It had drawn connections no human had dared to make. These formations were not isolated symbols or cosmic graffiti. They formed a lattice, a map, not one drawn on a single continent, but one spanning the globe and pointing skyward. Each formation was a node, and when plotted together, they hinted at a larger geometry, one not bound to the Earth's surface, but extending into space itself. It became clear that the formations weren't random occurrences. The timing, the alignments, the mathematical structures, all of it pointed to coordination. Some researchers argued the possibility of pre-human origin. Others went further, proposing an interdimensional intelligence attempting to communicate using a visual syntax that only advanced perception and machine assistance could begin to understand. The fact that artificial intelligence was now key to even parsing the data made the mystery more surreal. We needed machines to even glimpse what might have been left here for us all along. One formation in particular, discovered in 2022, shocked the team. When the AI cross-referenced its design with known astronomical data, it matched the structure of a gravitational wave emission recently detected by LIGO, the observatory that identifies ripples in space-time. The wave hadn't been announced publicly until a week after the formation appeared. There was no way anyone on Earth could have created that design without knowing the data in advance. It wasn't a prediction. It was a mirror. It was as if the formation responded to an event outside our solar system in real time. That's when the conversation changed. Scientists stopped asking if these were messages and began asking whether they were responses. Were we part of a dialogue we hadn't even known was happening? Were the formations not just messages to us, but replies to something we had already done? Launched signals, exploded particles, probed deep space? Had we triggered attention? And if so, what kind? One researcher quietly posed a final possibility, a question so unnerving it was kept off official transcripts. What if the designs aren't meant for us at all? What if they're markers, coordinates left behind not to enlighten us, but to guide something else? The AI, neutral as ever, simply noted that the formations fit the geometry of navigational lattices used in deep space positioning systems. It didn't care about the implications. It only cared that the pattern was real. And it was. We might be reading a signal, or we might be standing in the middle of a beacon. Crop circles were once dismissed as a joke, a curiosity, or a hoax. But artificial intelligence has changed the game. It doesn't care about belief, it doesn't laugh, it doesn't speculate. And now it has revealed something that science can no longer ignore. Whether these formations are ancient messages, cosmic maps, or warnings etched into the skin of our planet, one thing is clear. Something intelligent is at work. Something watching, waiting, or perhaps already speaking in a language we've only just begun to understand. The question now is, what happens when we finally answer back? If you want to keep unraveling secrets the world isn't ready to explain, subscribe now and turn on notifications. The next signal could be just one field away.